This is the Final Round Podcast, coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York. And now your host, Chris Marquardt. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Final Round Drag Racing Podcast. Excited to have you along for episode number 25 tonight. We've got a fun guest in store for everybody tonight. Wally Clark joining us to hang out for a little while. Excited to have Wally on the program. We're also going to be catching up with Jason Oldfield, who is tuning in with us via Skype. So hopefully, barring anything unforeseen, all the technology of the evening should continue to hold up, and we'll be able to pull this thing off. What do you think?
We got our fingers crossed.
Yeah, it's all smoke and mirrors at this point. Let me see if we can pull that up some. There we go. So let's see. So, surprise, we got a show tonight, Jason.
Yeah, I have to say that I can't say that I didn't know that we didn't have a show, but I was surprised when I texted my son and told him that he could borrow my car, but he wasn't going to be home until 7:15. So that kind of made it a little bit difficult for me to drive out to Seneca Falls this evening. So hopefully the viewers will be okay with the Skype video that we're doing tonight.
We got a great guest hanging out with us for the night, Wally Clark, joining us on the line. Welcome to the show, Wally.
Well, glad to be here with you guys. Thanks for the invite.
For sure. I'm glad you were available. I know things were a little bit late in the. There we go. Things were a little bit late in bringing everything together, so I'm glad we were able to get you on tonight. Wally has had a storied career in drag racing, former world record holder, won a bunch of NHRA National events, second place in points back in 1992, and I think the most interesting leg of information that came to us as I was talking with Jason before we got the show up and on its feet was you were integral in organizing the New South Wales Hot Rod Association before you moved to Canada.
That's right. Back in the very early 60s, my brother was the president of the local hot rod club, and he was the one that got me sucked into this drag racing thing way back then when I was about 15 years old. And that was in the very early days of drag racing in Australia. And eventually there was 3 hot rod clubs that grouped together and started to organize drag racing at the old Castlereagh drag strip on the outskirts of Sydney. And that was the first organized drag race in that part of the country was March 28th, 1965, and I was there.
Wow, that's pretty cool to see how far drag racing has come here. What was the scene like in Australia? I mean, a lot of those timestamps, anyways. Those parallel pretty well with what we had going on here in the United States.
I think the action was just about as intense. I mean, We used to get awesome crowds, but the cars were different. And as old WJ always says, the cars are only tools, but the energy and the excitement behind it was the same. It was pretty rabid back there. Two of the guys imported some American cars. I had some Hemi 63 and 64 Chryslers that were imported. They used to race with the local guys, and of course they were much more powerful than our local stuff, but it was still racing. It was still a lot of intense competition.
That's cool. Other than those imported Chryslers, what was the premier car at that point? What was the entry that everybody was chasing?
Well, they had all kinds of wacko stuff. We had a lot of English cars there, obviously. So they had Jaguar-powered rails, Holden, which was the Australian GM car. Uh-huh. They had 6-cylinder Holden engines because we never had local V8s at that time. Right. And, of course, the old Chevy-Ford competition raged there, too, because they had their Ford Falcons with their 6 cylinders. And it was pretty intense. Some of those cars back in those days even used to go in mid-14s, low 15s when they were hotted up. They were pretty impressive, really, when you look back.
Right. So the typical battles that we're familiar with here raged throughout that time period, and then at some point you packed up and moved to Canada. When was that?
That was I sailed out of Sydney Harbor on August the 22nd, 1966. never looked back. I never went back. I never went back for 43 years of the first trip. I never went back till 2010. I came over here because I was always a car freak from the time I was, 6, 7, 8 years old.
Right.
That's all I could think of. And now, when I came over here, I was 20 years old, and that was right at the beginning of the muscle car era.
Mm-hmm.
And I came over here and looked around. I was like a pig at a strawberry festival. And I fell into a group of guys that were racers, and I never looked back. I had a ball. That's
amazing. So what was the catalyst to making the transition from Australia to come over to Canada?
Well, my dad died when I was 10 years old, and my mom and my oldest sister, they had a pretty close relationship. And when she married a Canadian back in the old country, and they had a granddaughter, and they say distance makes the heart grow fonder. So after they moved back, letters went back and forth, and then my mom decided she wanted to come over and move to Canada. So my original plan was to come over for 6 months to a year and take a look around, and then go back, and it never happened, man. and I got to tell you, I have no regrets.
Right. So did it take long for you to find that drag racing community and get welcomed into that?
Oh, about 2 days, I guess. when I heard the old Sunday Niagara ads from way back when, I had to find out where that was, and then because then it was only like a 10 or 15 minute drive from where we lived in Niagara Falls, so then that started it all. So I got involved. Couldn't help it.
Right. Once the needle's in, it's in. It doesn't really matter where you are. You'll find that, right?
I got to tell you something. This drag racing thing. They say that it's a disease for which there is no cure, and there's a lot of truth to that. Now, and any level of success you have, and as my old buddy Joe Scott used to say, we don't got to inject her, buddy. It's already in there. So I've always used the analogy, like every little bit of success you have, that needle just goes in a little deeper.
Right.
It's just hard to quit. I know here I am at my age. A lot of people were probably hoping I should have quit a long time ago, but I'm still at it.
You're still actively driving?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I still enjoy it. I haven't raced as much as I would have liked to. My plans this year were to get out a lot sooner in the year, but then I had some engine problems which delayed my deal, and then I finished the year off pretty good.
Yeah, Jason was telling me that it's one of those things that it never stops, and that you're still regularly in the car, still regularly at the shop, and had his fingers crossed that he could catch you, given how late it was in the day. He still had a chance to catch you at the shop when you were working on the cars. Going through that community and racing at Niagara and everything through the 60s and 70s, what brought you to the NHRA circuit, because you found some pretty good success with NHRA in your time as well?
Well, one of my mentors, who probably my biggest mentor after I came to Canada, was when I met Pete Fedden. Mm-hmm. He's an old legend of his own making, and I started out with a friend. We built I started out racing in my '69 Chevelle SS. I was involved with some other guys, but then I started to race a '69 Chevelle SS in the old pure stock classes and things like that. And then I got involved. I built a 67 Camaro with a friend. Ran Super J with a stick, and that deal was kind of short-lived. Mm-hmm. And then I hooked up with Pete Fedden, and then I had built way back when, locally up here, we had like a mini pro circuit. Mm-hmm. And I had built a 73 Vega to compete in that, but by the time, back in those days, I was scrounging for whatever I could to put something together. And by the time that I got that car done, that kind of circuit was defunct. So I used to race locally with D-Altered in it, and ran in the early days of bracket racing. We used to call it ET1 and ET2. Mm-hmm. So at Lancaster, I'd run in D-Altered, and I did pretty good there with that. And then I ran ET1 pretty much everywhere else. And then I got involved with Pete Fedden, and that's when I built my first super stock 67 Camaro, and that was in 1974. That was a one-year deal. That was a 327, 275 horse. We ran it in Super J automatic back in those days. And then I took a year off and started my business. And then in 75, I built another one. And that was a Super H automatic car, and I raced that for a number of years. And then I fell into that deal when GM was sponsoring a bunch of sportsman cars through F.J. Smith.
Right.
And I had 6 GM deals with F.J. Smith cars, and been very flattered that it came my way, and I've had a bunch of really good cars, so I really can't complain. They've made me look good to whatever level I've looked good at. So.
Now, when did that start, Wally? When was the first GM deal that you had? I mean, certainly I know that, once I guess in, let's call it the mid-'80s, once you started doing the Oldsmobile stuff, that obviously you had those deals with FJ. But, I mean, I guess it sounds like it started a lot earlier than that.
Well, the first deal started out in, I think it was like 80, they're talking about in 84, when we wanted to do the GT cars. And... the 82 there was a group of us. We approached it was Steve Gibbs, as a matter of fact. We approached Steve and Greg Exakalis when he was the division director. He said, "You know what? These old cars are getting stale. Why don't you let us put these old engines in a new body?" And that started to develop. God, it had to be in about 83. And the first of the GT cars came out shortly. I think it was 84. Early 84. I never got mine built until right around Indy of 84 was the first one. And I raced that until about 89. GM had approached me. They were doing Oldsmobile cutlass, like the big cutlass bodies, and I really loved the Camaro, and I was kind of reluctant to do an Oldsmobile over the Camaro. And then finally, when they went to the front-wheel drive cars in 89, I got one of the first Calais, and I ran that modified for a while before I put a regular GT motor in it. So that was, I think the GT stuff started right around 80, like late 83, early 84, and it's progressed from there.
Yeah, I was showing Chris some of the pictures of some of the various cars that you had, like you said, the Calais. So I guess the Camaro, was that the first official GM deal car that you had? I'll say 85, 86 Camaro?
No, I built that car in 84. Like, I finished it for Indy in 84. And that wasn't a GM deal. That was my own deal.
Okay.
The original plan, they started out, they wanted to give them to prior world champions like Bobby Warren, Bortman, Jeff Taylor, and guys like that. And I think I was probably about 6th or 10th on the rung or whatever. And I could have had one earlier, but I kept the Camaro until 89 when I got the first Calais built, and then I sold it to a guy out in, oh boy, that car's been around too. That car, I sold that to a fella down in New Jersey, Walt Creel, and I bought it back from him on a whim. And then
really?
When Joe Scott's house burned down, he lost everything. I sold it to him. He raced it with some success for a number of years, and there's another fellow down in Pennsylvania has it now.
Oh, interesting. Now, looking at the various pictures, I mean, I have to say that I knew some of the, the more modern cars, obviously, the Calais, the Achieva. I remember those cars, but I had mentioned to Chris earlier that I felt like the Camaro might have been the most successful car that you have. Is that a fair statement?
You know what? I won the most national events with it, but each of them had their own merits. I mean, I did well with all of them. Like I won my class at Indy over that span like 7 or 8 times. I had a new car every 2 years, and it is funny because I ran a guy in Atlanta. I had a 69 Camaro, and he told me, he said, "Wally," he says, "I've raced you 4 times or something in the last 6 years, and you've had 4 different cars." So I had a new car every 2 years. It's a pretty neat deal, really. But each car had its own merits. I mean, as the competition got tougher, it became harder and harder to win. But each one had its own level of success in my mind in terms of record holding and class wins and things like that. I did pretty good with all of them, really. The current car I have now is the last one I got from GM in 99, I think it was built, but I never raced it till 2003. So
that's a great
an
name, right?
Oldsmobile Calais. I had two I had two Oldsmobile Achievers and two Pontiac Grand Ams, all built by F.J. Smith. By the way, as far as I'm concerned, builds the best super stock car out there.
Well, I don't think you're the only one that has that opinion. I mean, he won, the CarCraft Sportsman Car Builder of the Year, I think, twice, maybe?
At least twice, yeah. At least twice, and he deservedly so.
Yeah, and certainly if you were to go and look at, the super stock ranks.
Pretty good.
Yeah, if you looked at the super stock ranks, in the, let's call it mid-'80s to mid-'90s, certainly. I mean, I would say, every world champ NHRA National event winner was generally running an F.J. Smith car. I mean, they definitely were a nice piece for sure, and still out there. I mean, that's the amazing thing. I mean, you got cars that are at this point.
To keep track of all of the points races and national events that his cars won, and I don't know how he kept up with it. I mean, his record was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, and best engineered and best appearing awards too, right?
Yeah, I won a handful of those myself.
Yeah, and it's really crazy. And like I said, you look back now, and the number of those vehicles that are still out there competing actively. I mean, Billy Lieber, the truck that he just sold. I mean, that S10 was an FJ car that Jeff Taylor bought, or I think he bought that or built that with FJ initially. But I mean, here it is. Really 20 years later, and that car is still essentially an active competition. It's it really is a testament to how good of a car that FJ builds.
My old 89 Calais is out in Washington State, still running, and still a good car.
Jeez. That Calais is a good-looking car.
It really is incredible.
I mean, the car I have now, I painted it 16 years ago. I mean, I usually have about 3 or 4 cars in that time. This is the longest I've ever owned a car, and it's still a great winning piece.
Is it really 16 years ago that you repainted that car?
I got the car. It was delivered to me in December of 2009 when I was in the middle of a divorce, and I painted. I tell you, when I painted it was Christmas 2002. So that's 15 years ago.
Wow. Yeah,
wow.
I can't believe it's that long, because I remember when you first got that car, and then had it repainted. I just can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah, I know. Me neither. I was looking at it the other day when somebody said, "Boy, that's nice paint. When'd you do that?" And I had to think about it. I painted it, and Dan Delaney laid out the flames for me. I tried to do it.
Right.
I tried to do it, and compared with the flames that I laid out compared to what Dan did, you might have thought I was drunk when I was trying to lay them out.
So I guess I'd like to take a step back and kind of go back to the New South Wales Hot Rod Association. So, when you guys started that, I mean, you had mentioned to me earlier today when we talked briefly that it was yourself and a buddy, and I think your brother, you had said that, kind of got organized. It sounded like you organized multiple organizations together kind of into one big cohesive organization. Is that fair?
Yeah, there was three hot rod clubs, and the one that I was involved in is called the Dragons, the DRAG-ENS, and really, believe it or not, there's still a group of hot rodders there today, and as strong as ever, and they do a couple of annual hot rod runs. I just saw some pictures that one of the guys sent to me. Yeah, but what happened was my brother, the 3 hot rod clubs formed what they called the New South Wales Hot Rod Association. My older brother George, who still fiddles with drag racing cars with his son in Houston, he lives in Conroe, Texas. He was the president, And my friend that just came over to visit, he's like an old historian, Bob Honeybrook. He's over in California right now for the Hot Rod reunion. He was the race director, and another fellow that we know, he was the starter. I mean, all these guys come visit every once in a while, and that was the start of it. That was the start of the organized drag races in Sydney. We had one of the top DJs, who's still a friend of mine in New South Wales, Jeff Hall. He was the announcer. He used to work out a little old trailer there right by the start line, and while everybody else had a real function back in those days, like I told you earlier, I was like 17 years old and I had tow trucks. So while everybody else did the technical and the high profile stuff, if you blew your mess up on the track, I was the guy that holds off. So.
Now, I still, and I'm sure you do as well, I mean, there's the Australian drag racing, is it Australia National Drag Racing Association, I think?
Australian National Drag Racing Association. Their drag racing organizations are kind of splintered right now. They have ANDRA and they have Thunder 400, which is basically administered by IHRA. They have their groups. Their Group 1 cars, they call them, that's their pro categories. And they weren't happy with the level of exposure they got, and you know, unfortunately, our sport, no matter where it is, I mean, there's a certain level of egos that are involved, and I think that's partly what happened back there. And I'm sure there was some legitimate basis for them to become disenchanted with ANDRA, because they formed their own group. So it kind of splintered. It splintered like the membership base and the competition base, but they seem to be surviving there. But I don't know how it's going to affect the deal with IHRA, because they have their different classes, not the same structure that we have, but it's a similar structure with different categories. But it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Man, they're pretty rabid there. They have some nice tracks. I've been to Sydney. I've been to Calder. When I go back, I have a good friend of mine races there, Graham Cooper. He's the Australian equivalent of Danny Fletcher. He's won every Australian national event that's possible. He still races the same Holden station wagon that he started out with 40 years ago. And he's like, I've had him over here and let him race my car once in a while. He's a pistol, and he's the Australian version of Danny Fletcher, so he gets involved there, and I go over and see him. But I was just thinking earlier, though, an interesting tidbit. It's a rare deal that nobody else in the world is ever going to see. I was in North America, obviously, when I saw the first 6-second pro stock run, the first 200-mile-an-hour run. And in Australia, I was there on 2 different occasions to see the same thing in Australia with Lee Bektash with the Mopar, when he was the first 6-second pro stock car in Australia and the first 200-mile-an-hour pass. So that's a rare deal. But the big difference over there is they run 400 small blocks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they run 400 small blocks, and I was there, so I saw all of those 4 benchmarks that you'll never see again. So,
right.
And I don't know what that does for me, but I was there.
Yeah, I will say that I tune in. I mean, occasionally and I don't even know what network it is on, but I know Andra is on TV occasionally, and I don't know if it's on like the Lucas Oil or the Lucas Oil network or what it is. But I have to say, when it's on, I watch it. I mean, it's entertaining. I find it entertaining to watch.
Oh yeah. Oh no, it's the competition's the same. Because they run a lot of different engine combinations. Although the product, the equipment is a lot closer now than it was when we first started. It's like they have access to all the same pieces that we have, whereas when we first started, we used to have to hand make everything. My older brother George in Texas, man, he's an engineer. The guy is brilliant. He used to run a 39 Plymouth Coupe with a little flathead in it. The guy used to grind his own camshafts, made his own tri-carb intake manifold in that thing, and that you figure you go back now to 1962, 63. That thing used to run like 16 and 17 seconds. An L39 Plymouth coupe with a flathead. And then at one point in time, this is how far ahead he was. We found a 413 Ram Dodge engine.
Yeah.
And we stuffed it in there, and he made his own sheet metal intake manifold. Like me personally, in those days, I didn't really understand what he was doing, but he had it all figured out. He had his own sheet metal intake manifold that he made for it. The guy was amazing. And then, of course, we couldn't get it to run properly. Then we pulled it out and put the flathead back in. But now, in retrospect, I realized we just never knew how to time the V8.
Right. Now, your brother George, how much older is your brother than you?
He's 3 years older than me.
All right. Now, did he? I mean, it sounds like so. He did some when you came over to Canada. Were you guys essentially in the same part, both in Niagara Falls area, living together at that point in time?
No, he was in Windsor.
Oh, okay.
He was in Windsor. He stayed there for about 3 or 4 years. And then his wife decided she didn't like the cold, so they went back for a number of years, and then they moved to Texas.
Oh, okay. So did you guys ever do any racing together? I guess as partners, or
no, not racing per se. No. When I was a kid there, I was there I used to tow his car to the track and tow it home, and I never really got to race it myself. I did my racing. I never really did any serious racing till I came over here.
Yeah.
I mean, I was exposed to it, and I was probably involved in the first truck race in the world back in I don't know, it had to be 63 or 64. We lined up 2 tow trucks and had a race there, and so that's. I don't know whether that's a record or not, but you think about it, probably it was.
Sounds good anyway.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I've heard a saying that no matter what the vehicle, it doesn't matter what it is, but you go back to caveman times and with them with their wheels, and if it's got wheels and some type of propulsion, 2 guys are going to want to race to see what's fastest.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. That analogy still stands today.
Oh yeah. I mean, cripes at Lancaster, they have their annual, I guess it is, dump truck and I don't know if it's tractor. I guess it's dump truck and tractor trailer race or whatever it is. It's like, and they get a bunch of trucks out there. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, some of the guys that set that stuff up, I mean, they're pretty powerful when you consider they got 800-900 horsepower and about 1,500 to 2,000 pounds-feet of torque. You'll get them moving because they create a lot of smoke though too.
Right.
Mosquito control.
So when you came over here, you started racing at Niagara initially.
Yep. Initially, yes, and then as I got more involved, I mean, I used to go to the races with a bunch of local guys. There's a guy back in town I used to work for when I first came over, a fellow named Chuck Story. He used to race over at Niagara, and he was good friends with Jerry Hammond, who owned Frontier Ford over there, who also owned the old Niagara drag strip at the time, or leased it, whatever. So. And that's how I got sucked in over here, and it was great. It was a great era. We had a ball.
Now, were you one of the, I guess I would call it the regulars that would typically, and you'll have to pardon my ignorance just because of the fact that I'm a little young, but I think it was Thursday night was Lancaster, Friday might have been Cayuga or something, Empire was Saturday, and Sunday was someplace else. Were you doing that 4 days a week racing type of thing at that point in time?
Absolutely. If we could have raced 5 or 6 times a week, we'd have done it. Because we had enough time to race at the sanctioned tracks and kept us off the streets somewhat.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, not completely. And so you'd said that you got hooked up with Pete Fedden, who was kind of your mentor. Now, was it? And again, I honestly didn't realize, or I probably knew and maybe forgot that you and Pete raced together. Now, were you actually partners in one specific car or a couple of cars?
We were partners. We were partners in the. We had a very loose partnership. We raced together for 25 years. We had neither of us had financial involvement in each other's cars, but we worked on each other's cars. We traveled together, and we split a bunch of expenses. But,
okay.
It was a loose partnership, but we had a great time. That was 25 years. We traveled together. We were all over the place.
Wow. Yeah, I guess I didn't realize that. So yeah, it was basically like you kind of formed a 2-car team, right? Each guy taking care of his own car, but yeah, kind of a 2-car team racing together. Now, did Pete stop racing after that 25 years? I mean, I haven't seen Pete Fedden out at the racetrack in a long time.
No, he kept racing. Pete actively raced till about 10 years ago, I guess.
Oh, okay.
10 or 12 years ago, then he was involved sporadically. He and Joe Fioravanti, who used to drive Pete's car when he quit racing the Super Stock, because Pete had a real fast A-Stock automatic 67 Corvette Coupe, a silver one.
Oh,
so
really?
He raced that, and then Joe Fioravanti raced his Camaro, and we all hung together. We all raced together. I ran Joe. Well, I'll tell you how far back that was. I ran Joe in the final at Montreal and Saint Air in '79.
Really?
On that, so Pete was still driving then, and he actually got runner-up at the IHRA race in Grand Bend here about, I'm going to say 4 years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh.
Jimmy Marshall beat him in the final out there. So and now he just goes to the track with his customers. He still builds engines, and he just goes and spectates. And if you know Pete, when he gets together in a group, he always has an audience telling stories. Most of them are true,
I would say I thought I told Chris earlier. I thought I said Wally is. When you get to the races, Wally's like a king holding court. It's like everybody gathers around Wally to hear Wally tell stories. That's you're saying that Pete is a notch above you?
Oh, absolutely. He does it sober. I need a few pops. I need a few pops before I loosen up like that as a rule.
Yeah, I will say that I don't really. I mean, I know the name Pete Fedden, obviously.
A lot of stories to tell about all the traveling that we did over the years and things that happened. And unfortunately, he just had major surgery done yesterday, and we wish him well. I don't know if he's out there listening, but good luck to you, Cap.
Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah, best wishes for a quick recovery. I mean, he's certainly a legend, I guess I would call it, around these parts. I mean, anybody that was around for drag racing in the 70s, 80s, 90s certainly knows the name Pete Fedden. I don't know how many people know him outside of this area. I mean, did he ever? I mean, you've won national events. You chased the tour for quite a bit. I mean, obviously people know Dan Fletcher because of the success he's had. But there was, so many great racers from around this area. But I'm not sure that Pete really has the recognition outside of here.
You think about the guys that live around here that have done well. It's really amazing for generally a small area.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, I tell people all the time. I mean, between yourself and F.J. Smith and Pete Fedden, and I mean, then you have Mike Janis, Jim Oddie, Jim Zakia. I mean, just the list goes on and on.
It's endless, yeah. Pete used to travel a lot in the early 70s, early to mid 70s, and then he quit traveling some probably in the mid 80s. Although he did have an 89, Calais in 1990. Then they did an Achiever in 92. But he never traveled. But when Pete was doing a lot of his good racing, it was in the earlier years of stock and super stock. I don't know whether the notoriety was around them, but in his own right, he was a good drag racer. He was a tough boy. He taught us never to quit. I remember one night when we were at Cayuga. It was a Wednesday night race, and I blew the rear end in the Chevelle wagon in the final, and man, we pulled that cover off and drained the oil out of it. And so he could race in the final. So all the chunks, if they broke off, they'd fall out. And he he left the start line. All you could see was sparks going all the way down the track, and it was just chunks, metal chunks flying off and grinding together. And I'm not so sure that he didn't win. I mean, that's how determined he was, and he instilled that in us rather, and he taught us never to quit, and some of us never have, and we never can.
That's great. Running down the track with the rear end all opened up like that. That's pretty cool.
With no oil in it. Oh yeah, unbelievable.
Well, oil wasn't going to stand anywhere with the car on.
That's the kind of racer he was, though, and he'd be the first guy to help somebody else if they were in trouble. I mean, he used to do all of our engines. I can remember if I broke an engine, I don't know, I think it was back in the old Thursday night days, and we were getting ready to go to Maple Grove to a points race. I mean, we worked in my garage. We used to do it all, either in his shop with a handheld hone, and we either did it in his shop, or when I built my first house, I had a nice double-car garage there. I mean, we do them right there. And we work on them all night, put them together, never go to sleep, and around 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, you get the crazy giggles. We'd settle down in about half an hour and then put it all together, and then we'd head out and travel. So, I mean, he worked hard at it for all of us kids that were hanging around there.
Now, when was your first? It was your first big win, I guess. Would you consider that to be was it the Spring Nationals in '85? I think it was.
No, my first, the one I consider to be my first, you can believe it or not. I won in '79 at Empire. I won the Gold Cup Nationals when it was an NHRA Open.
Okay.
And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, I won the Molson Grand National when the NHRA used to race in Montreal. I won that in '79. Yep. And then I won the '85 Spring Nationals in Columbus, and then I won Indy same year, and then I won Gainesville in '86. And then we got a little sporadic. I ended up in a couple of finals here and there. And then I won the IHRA World Nationals at Norwalk in '95.
Yeah, that's a big win too. I mean, at that point in time, the Norwalk races were just huge. I mean, I remember Super Rod, if you will. I remember it being, 128 cars first round because it was the week before Indy, right?
I used to love racing at Norwalk. That was a neat place to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, would you consider Indy your biggest win?
You know what? They're all big. I mean, they're all big. I mean, people put a lot of significance on Indy, and rightfully so. But to me personally, I mean, they're all big. When I won Indy, it really didn't sink in. And I'll tell you why. I have an automobile appraisal company, like damage appraisals, and right around, I think it was May 28th in '85. We had a vicious hailstorm come through southern Ontario, and I was working like 24/7. And the point come to Columbus, and I just said, you know what? That's it. Shut it down. Like, we were looking at 300 cars a day trying to get all the damage assessed.
Wow.
And I figured, I'm going to go to Columbus. So I shut it down. I don't want any more appointments. We were booking appointments every 5 minutes to look at these cars, and we're doing them on the dictaphone. So I said, we'll start again on Tuesday morning, and lo and behold, I went there and I won Columbus, and then the Indy. I mean, you got to remember, like in a 9-week period, we did something like 12,000 appraisals, damage appraisals, hail damage, and when I won Indy, I mean, I was just so overwhelmed with work and everything else, and then about 2 or 3 weeks later, I stopped on the side of the road, and I said, well, damn it, man, I just won the U.S. Nationals. I got so involved, and I thought, damn, that's pretty good. Obviously, I mean, Indy is everybody's goal, and I'm very flattered that I was able to win it. I suppose it's my biggest. I mean, now I win one round, it's like winning Indy. It's the same thrill.
Yeah, I would say, I guess, as you get older too, I have certainly found that I still want to win, certainly, but I'm not cutthroat racing like I used to be. I mean, racing isn't number one to me anymore. If the weather looks nice and I think I'm going to have a good time, then sure, I'll go to the races. But racing doesn't come before everything else like it used to 20, 25 years ago for me. And, a big part of it is the social aspect, right? And I know you get this with the Can-Am Stock Super Stock series that, you go out there, you're hanging out with your buddies, right? And yeah, you're racing too, but it's a chance to have that social interaction with your friends again too.
Well, to me, the competition, and I'm still when I line up. I mean, my old adage was before I'd race anybody, we'd flip a coin and whatever. I just tell everybody, and it got to be kind of a joke that, you know what? Just remember, I'm gonna hate your guts for about 10 seconds, and after that, we're all right. But when I'm in the car, I'm still as intense.
Yep.
I'm still as intense as I am. I mean, I don't race as often as I would like, mind you. Years ago, when oh God, it didn't matter what was happening at the office or the shop, we'd light up and go. But now that I'm older, I'm much more mature. I want to worry about stuff that happens. But when I go racing, I'm there to race. But you're right, the social aspect of it after hours is good. And what changed that with me is after I bought an older motorhome and traveled with my daughters and my lady here to the races, we just have so much more fun and we're so much more relaxed. We get out and cook, we socialize with the people that we race with, and we never used to do that when we traveled with a truck and trailer, because it was always you hurry up, get out to the hotel, feed the kids, get them up in the morning, get back, and now we socialize a lot more. But when it comes to competition, I'm still there for the race.
Right. Yeah, I never really thought about the aspect of the effect of motorhomes and staying at the track on the social environment, because yeah, you're right. I mean, when you first, and this is crazy to me, and Chris, I don't know if you knew this or not, but back, let's call it in the mid 70s at an NHRA National event, at the end of each day's worth of racing, everybody packed up all their stuff and went back to the hotel.
Right.
You didn't leave that stuff at the track. And I never really thought about it from a social aspect of it, that, it was really difficult to probably forge those friendships with a lot of the guys if you were traveling, because of the fact that you weren't staying at the track. Now when you're done, you pull your car in the trailer and you head next door and basically fire up the barbecue, and everybody in the area barbecues together, right? And it's kind of interesting how that's transpired over.
That's not the first time I've heard that story either. That element of that era, talking with some folks that used to work on the safety safari with NHRA at that time period, and points a little bit later than that it wasn't the same atmosphere. The drivers would get their cliques and their friendships and stuff forming, and they would meet at different hotel rooms, and you might see one or two people that are migrating between the hotel rooms, but that social aspect that's so much more common, even now with the local level, it just wasn't there.
Well, what it did, it created everybody to be polarized. I mean, we would hang with the group that we race with. Like, there was 3 or 4 of us, Joe Scott, myself, Jim Baberka, Dick Henry, and we'd all stay together and we would travel together. But I mean, everybody wants to complain about the system as it is and the organization, but you know what? Everything changes and it progresses, and you have to embrace the good with the bad. And I mean, today it's a lot better. I remember when we used to go to Indy. I mean, we would sit out in a field for 3-4 days waiting to get teched. Then you'd sit in the lanes for a day or 2, and you would never know if you were ever going to get a time run.
Right.
And the pros are in the same boat. I mean, this deal now, when they call you in sessions, when you get cold, you're going to get 1 or 2 runs. It's a lot easier when you leave your stuff at the track. mean, it used to be crazy. You used to have to load everything up and take everything back to the motel with you. The only good thing about that was we used to be able to drive around in our cars or rent a car and go around all the hotels and motels and see all the pros working on their cars in those days, which was kind of unique. Because today, it's not the same. But you know what? The sport progresses, and you got to embrace the good with it. And there is still a lot of good, despite there's a lot of negative stuff going on about different organizations and people and stuff. I mean, you got to stay above it. You got to stay focused on what we're there for, and we're there to race, and that's the bottom line. And if you don't want to race, stay home. It's my attitude.
Were the pits open then, the way that they are now? I mean, was there as much access for a casual fan to move in and out of the pit area the way that we have now, or were things more cordoned off?
Oh, no, the pits were always open. That was one of the beauty of attending an NHRA race. Even back then, the pits were accessible to the regular spectators, and it was that part hasn't changed. Although I think the pro cars being by comparison from then to today, the pro cars are a lot more complicated. I don't think have access to being so close to the cars now as you used to be able to back then. But the system was the same. You could get close enough. I guess the people that go today get close enough to see what they want to see, and it's one of those deals. Things change.
Well, yeah, I mean, there had to be some evolution of that as the cars became more high-tech and exotic, and they needed more space when they were taking them apart and tearing them down and things like that. That was going to happen, but there's generations of fans now that are going and still remember what the old days were like, but I don't hear anybody really complaining about it. You know, they seem to be pretty content with the access that they got. There's no other major racing organizations that can immediately come to mind where you've got that degree of access to a touring organization's top stars and getting that close to the equipment. You know, NASCAR, you gotta give up a kidney to get garage access during race modes. You know what I mean? It's a completely different world with drag racing.
Well, I think it's the only form of motorsport certainly where you can do that. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, that's the attraction to the fans, that they can get around and walk at the pits. I mean, when you figure out really NHRA, if you go to an NHRA or any sanctioned drag race, I mean, it's a car show. Everybody has their own vision of what they want their cars to look like, and people walk around and look at them. I mean, it's really amazing. I mean, and everybody appreciates things at a different level also.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great deal, and it's good for the sport because it exposes a close-up view of the car to the regular fan, and of course the kids love that stuff too.
Right. Families
get together and move around and look at things, and sometimes even a guy like me, they'll ask for my autograph. And then I got to think, boy, how did I sign it?
I have to say, I always get a kick out of that too, and I guess you at least have some big credentials behind you. It's like I always get a kick when kids come up and they ask for my autograph. It's like, what do you want my autograph for? I've never accomplished anything. So, but yeah, it is fun to interact with the kids. I mean, I always love taking them and having them sit in the car and seeing the big smiles on their face, and their parents are always like, "Oh my God, are you sure?" It's like, yeah, what are they going to do? They're not going to do anything. Go ahead, climb in, get some pictures, and who knows? Maybe I'll get the kid addicted, and he'll be a drag racer one day.
I like to sit him in the car, let him put the helmet on, take a picture of him, and then email it to him later on.
Right. Yep.
And then they'll come back the next year, big grin on their face. They want to do it again. I really, like the competition is ours, but the spectacle of it is for the fans. So if the kids come by and want to sit in the car, God bless them, good for them. We might need them in a few years to support our habits, so we can keep going too. There's a lot of gray hair out there when you look around anymore. I mean, the source of the competitors has changed. I mean, the kids aren't as rabid into cars as we used to be back then. I mean, we couldn't wait to see the new models come out every year, and now, of course, you get the tuners out there, and But our performance cars kind of fell off until the last like 10 years again. They started to make some decent hot rods. So there's that interest, and it's got to redevelop again. There was a period of time in the sport, I think, where the interest in the cars that were being built by the factories and being sold, they're kind of flat. They're basically drivers. It's pretty hard to get excited about a Camaro Z28 that's got 180 horsepower and weighs 5,000 pounds.
Right. Was that part of the motivation, I guess, Wally?
79 and 80, but they're definitely better today. The technology in these new cars is pretty phenomenal.
Oh yeah. I mean, was that part of your motivation back? I guess let's call it in the early '80s to try to get NHRA and the sanctioning bodies to allow the conversion cars to take place, because that really was you look at let's call it the late 70s, early 80s was a pretty sad time for cars overall, right?
Yeah. Well, the classes had become stagnant, and everybody complained about those cars when we built them. We approached, I think it was Steve Gibbs, and it was Greg Exocalis, as myself, Jim Baberka, and I forget who else. We were at Englishtown. You know what? You guys really got to consider letting us put our old engines in a new car. And that's after the new Camaros came out in '82. And they went back and forth, and I know some guys out on the West Coast approached their people, Don Kennedy being one of them. He had one of the early Firebirds out there. And then they decided to do it, and then, of course, everybody bitched about it. But it's the progression, when the 66 Mustangs and 67 Camaros came out, they kind of obsoleted to some degree the old 55 Chevs and 48 Studebakers and Packards and stuff like that. And then of course the GT cars came along, and we kind of made those cars look a little stale. And now it's still this new stuff from the factory, the Copos and the Cobra Jets. I mean, complain about it as much as you will. It's progression, and you got to either like it or step back and let it go ahead of you. But you know what? It moves on, but there's still a spot for everybody, and like everybody has their own preference, and God bless them. I like to look at them all. I'm still a car nut, and I really appreciate the performance level of the new cars, despite the fact that my own car may not be competitive against them. But it's a step forward, and as you get older, you appreciate that.
Isn't that one of the things that's sort of lost in some elements of I don't know if national sport's the right way to say it, but it's still entertainment, isn't it? Isn't it still a form of entertainment? And you've got to get the fans hooked with something other than being wrapped up in the competition that's going on track. There's got to be something else to get the casual fan or the new fan hooked in some different way. And if all the cars look cookie cutter and there's no personality to anything, it's easy to not get turned on by what you're watching, especially if you don't completely understand what's happening on the track to begin with.
Without a doubt. I mean, if there's no spectators, there's no show. And whatever product the organizations put out there has to be appealing to the fan and the spectator, or they're not going to come back, and that's obvious. So, I mean, to some nostalgic degree, I guess somebody won't mind seeing an old 56 Chev or something like that go down the track, but they really don't understand that car. They look at it, boy, that's an old car kind of thing. What's it doing here? And you're right. I mean, whether we like it or not, drag racing is a form of entertainment. I mean, drag racing at any professional level is not going to survive on the racers and their crew alone. I mean, you have to put seats in this, put asses, as you want to put it, in the seats in the stands. And if you don't get that, I mean, no organization is going to survive, and it's not going to thrive. So, whatever we put out there has to be appealing to the general fan and the general public. I mean, you have to continually put some form of a hook, even once in a while, to bring somebody in to make it appealing to a regular person that's never attended a drag race before, to say, hey, what's this all about? Let's go take a look at it. And that's the key. So it has to be entertaining, or they're not going to show up, period. A lot of the times they don't understand the competition that goes on. I mean, we in the cars with a helmet on, we know exactly what we're there for and what we're supposed to do. But to the casual fan in the stands, that doesn't always translate like that. So it's definitely a form of entertainment, and that's what it's got to be.
You had Jason hooked at the reference to the '56 Chevy.
I like them too. They don't need cars. But in a lot of cases, you got to have them at a nostalgia day, and the mix of one or two in there is okay. And I'll tell you, there's some really nice '56, '57 Chevys out there.
Still waiting to see it,
and they're still competitive. But is that really what your general spectator wants to see? It's hard to tell. I mean, let's face it. Most fans, when they go to an NHRA National event, they're not there to see us. We're the fillers. So we got to make it entertaining to them. Hopefully, where they can sit back and say, "Geez, that's not a bad Eliminator," or "That's a nice car." But they're there to see the pros, and unfortunately, that's the way it's going to be.
Any chance you get the opportunity to remake that iconic scene from American Graffiti, you got to take it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's actually interesting just because this is very similar conversation to an article that I read someplace in response to what IHRA has just announced with the killing off of the class racing for IHRA, and part of it was, look, we have ourselves to blame kind of as racers, because one of the things that took place was that sponsors had to pull out for whatever reason, and then racers basically stopped showing up to the track because the payout wasn't good, and you basically had this self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will, that sponsors aren't going to sponsor racing with no racers there, and racers weren't going to show up because you had no money there, and so you ended up basically with this catch-22, and here we are, I guess 20 years later, that basically IHRA ceased to exist as far as what we've known for the last 40, 50 years or whatever it is. And I guess we haven't really talked about it much, but what's your opinion, I guess, overall, Wally, about what's happened there?
Well, first of all, I mean, I raced as much IHRA races as I could. And they're a great organization to run with. They're always accommodating. They're good people. And just circumstances change. I think their scheduling in a lot of areas conflicted with NHRA. I mean, it's tough to run IHRA points race within an hour or two of another NHRA race on the East Coast, because most guys prefer to run NHRA because of the point structure. More so, I guess they believe there's more prestige in winning an NHRA event rather than an IHRA, and it's really a shame that they never got supported. I know they tried hard. I mean, I don't know. I mean, is it just to the point where the series have become saturated? Or is it people want to spend their dollars going to a different class, or is it just because closer to home? I know in a lot of cases, though, too, the economy hasn't been great for a lot of little guys. I mean, there's a group of us that are fortunate that we own our own businesses and things like that, where we can afford to travel and take time off. But for the average guy that's working 5 or 6 days a week as a mechanic at a local auto store, I mean, how is he going to take 2 or 3 weeks off and travel a total of, say, 800-900 miles to hit 3 races in 3 weekends and win nothing? Like if he just had a bad streak and he lost first or second round at each of those races, he wins nothing, and it's probably cost him, like even if he does it conservatively, it's still going to cost him $1,000 US. That's like 1,500 Canadian, by the way.
Right.
and
True.
Has the lure gone? And it's
right.
hard. I know there was a time when IHRA thrived. I mean, you could win some serious money there. When I won their World Nationals, man, I won a pretty comparable buck. I mean, I was happy to win, let alone the money thing. But I mean, there was enough money there where it made you worth your while. I mean, I think most racers realize when they pull out of their driveway, they're not going to win every race they go to. But there has to be an opportunity. And if the opportunity is there to win a few bucks, then you go. But if there's not an opportunity there for you to win a few bucks, then if the weather looks iffy, boy, do I want to drive 300 miles there and 300 miles back for a rain out. And unfortunately, the last couple of years, and we've had some horrendous weather, like in this part of the country, on some weekends where it really hurt a lot of racing organizations. So I mean, I think it's more than just the one factor. And you're right. I mean, sponsors aren't going to post money for people who aren't going to compete for it because there's no value to that for them. And then the racer, when they pull out, then the racer says, well, I'm not going to go. There's nothing to win. So it's an age-old deal. We all got to pull together. I mean, we're all on the same train. We all got to pull together, and unfortunately, I don't know whether the series have become saturated to a point where nobody can fulfill a full field. I mean, all you got to do is look at the pro classes in NHRA right now.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're going to run 8-car fields in pro stock. What's that going to do? What's that going to do to the bottom half of the pro stock field? The guys that want to go there and compete, they probably know they're never going to win unless lightning strikes the other 6 to 15 guys that are in the class. So if they're going to run 8-car fields, some of these pro guys aren't going to tow 10, 12 hours with 2 or 3 or 4 pit crew and not qualify. They can barely qualify for a 16-car field. How are they going to qualify for an 8-car field? I think that's NHRA's way of just trying to kill the class off.
Right.
That's my own personal opinion. Rather, I hope not, because I've always liked pro stock as a class. But I mean, it's years ago. I think years ago when NHRA used to get 35 or 40 or 50 pro stock cars show up, they should have opened it up to a 32-car field and ran first round on Saturday night. But, you know what? And I'm not the only guy that believed that. I think probably along the line somebody suggested that to NHRA, but they figured they didn't want to do that, I guess. I can remember years ago when they ran first round, they had 32-car top fuel fields in Indy. They ran first round on Saturday nights, and that wasn't all that long ago. That was only about 35 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very true. I would like to take a moment to invite all of our friends that are watching on Finger Lakes Cable Access to turn over to the FingerLakes1.tv YouTube channel. Jump on there, search Final Round, follow us on Facebook. That's going to do it for our programming on Finger Lakes Cable Access. But we will be back. We're going to be switched over to YouTube right now, so jump over there and we'll catch up with you. We're going to play a soft close. We'll be right back with Wally Clark.
This has been the Final Round Drag Racing Podcast, coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Central Falls, New York. We'll see you right back here again in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching.
All right, and we are back. I'd like to welcome everybody that's coming over to us from Finger Lakes Cable Access. We're having a conversation in the last hour with Wally Clark, Jason Oldfield joining us on the Skype line here from the North Park building here at Academy Square, FingerLakes1.com headquarters in downtown Seneca Falls. Wally, we were just talking a little bit about what we had to look for in terms of the future of the sport, so to say, and some of the changes they've made with pro stocks. If pro stock goes away, what does that mean to some of the other tiers below it? Does that make space at the table for some of these other classes that are more popular at the local tracks, that are more popular on a regional level, that don't have the recognition on the national platform? Does that open the door for them to get more recognition that they justly deserve?
Like Superstock.
I think what's going to happen is the big organizations will bring in whatever category they can fill a field with. I think
like Superstock.
What I really worry about, the other little eliminator out there is competition eliminator. I mean, it's a great class to run, but it's expensive. I mean, if you look at some of the results and qualifying sheets from some of the points races across the country, I mean, they have 4 or 5 cars at a local points race. Well, NHRA. that eliminator can't sustain itself if they get 4 or 5 or 10 cars at a points race, and in some national events they only get 10 or 12 or 14. They don't, and
Sure.
a 32 car field. So that's another eliminator I think that's going to be in trouble unless they do something to open it up. I know some of the guys have suggested that what they should do is allow the modified cars that run in super stock, switch them back over to competition eliminator, fill that field some, and give them a different index. But then I don't know how many guys want to run virtually flat out over there. I mean, that's something to concern themselves with. But I think the organizations that operate these races, they're going to fill their races with whoever is willing to show up. And at some point, if stock and super stock fall off, I mean, they'll be next. Then their future will be different too. But I mean, for the most part, our two categories remain pretty healthy. Some others, and like you got Top Dragster and Top Sportsman, they're chomping at the bit. They want to get in on certain national events, which they do. And like I say, whatever attracts the fans, and however, like somebody like NHRA can fill their fields with, that's what they do, because they require money. They require money to operate, and if they're going to get 10 comp cars, that's not going to fill their coffers much. Because every form of major motorsport is suffering right now. You got to look around what's going on in NASCAR. NASCAR is in trouble too. They can't find full fields, and they actually sponsor or pay for the bottom feeders to get engines from different programs so they can at least qualify, so they can fill their field. So it's not only NHRA and drag racing that's susceptible to that kind of thing. I mean, it's other forms of sports also. But who knows where it's going to go? I mean, it's nothing is permanent, and there's always the evolution thing. And I'm sure at some point in time, our sport will find itself and evolve into whatever it evolves in, and I just hope I'm still around to be able to do it.
The thing with NASCAR is, on top of their struggles, is it takes so much money to just go watch the race. Even on some of the programs they put together, it's just so expensive to just go see it, and you don't have any access to like what you have with drag racing.
Yeah, that's true too. But even some of the drag racing facilities, I mean, we have some local races here and good races, and what they want to charge the average spectator to come in. I mean, to me, why wouldn't you make a carload deal? $75 a carload instead of $50 a head. Put people in the stands, give them something to see, sell them ice cream, sell them hot dogs, sell them shirts and hats. I mean, you're better off having, I think you're better off having 7 people in the stands for $75 or $100 than 2 people at $50. At least the stands are full, and they got to buy food and drink. I mean, and you're going to expose yourself to more spectators that way. But I don't know with the track operators if they see it that way. To me, as a business person, if it's my track, let them in, get people in there and get them hooked, especially if they're going to have a big weekend.
I think we need to have like a Clark raceway.
Not everybody can afford to take their kids to a local drag race and spend $300 if they're making $600 or $700 a week.
Right, it's true.
Oh yeah, yep. Well, hopefully, maybe we can get Wally Clark to buy one of the local tracks around here and show them how it's done.
I guarantee you that's not going to happen. I hope people. Back in the mid '80s, when we all worked, Pete Fedden had the lease at Empire, and of course Pete ran the place, and my ex-wife was the announcer there, and I used to help clean the track and get it all prepared, and that was a lot of work, buddy. And I guarantee you, in that business, you cannot make everybody happy. And and you're looking for me to buy an operated track? Sorry, guys, you're on your own.
That's funny you mentioned that, because I honestly I'd forgotten about that again, and that just came up in conversation recently. Yeah, what year was it that Pete leased Empire? Was it just the 1 year?
about 3 years, around 79, 80, 81.
Okay, yeah. Because Phil Hartman and I were talking about the history of Empire, and for some reason, I had thought that Empire had closed down, let's call it in the early to mid 70s, and then didn't reopen until Bob Metcalf bought it in the late 80s. And then I was talking with Phil, and Phil was saying, no, Pete Fedden ran it for a while, and some other guy ran it for a while. So Phil thought that it was probably the early 80s or mid 80s even when it had closed, and it wasn't really that closed for that long.
I didn't realize that it had closed.
When Bob Metcalf had bought it, it was actually closed, I know, for multiple years, but I guess for a much shorter time than I had thought. Like I said, I had thought it was closed for 15 years, but you're telling me right now that Fedden leased the track in the late 70s, early 80s, so it was back open by 1988, so it didn't sit closed all too long.
Yeah, from what I recall, there was some turbulence there with the ownership, but I don't know the specifics of it. But I know there was, in short order, there was some quick changes. I think Vito Antonelli was in on the deal one time with somebody.
Right. Yep.
And then Vito took it over on his own, and then I don't know at that point whether Bob Metcalf got it back. But I got to tell you, the people that run the place now, they do a fabulous job. They have that place in such good shape. It's a pleasure to go there and race with them. They treat you well. They got the place cleaned up, and the track surface is dynamite. And as a matter of fact, I just put a new ignition system in my car. I'm going to go test there on Saturday. I'd rather go test there because I know what the conditions, what the track's going to be like, rather than attempt to go to any of the local places over here. So they've done a marvelous job there, and they built a new tower. They've remodeled the old tower, and they've put a set of suites that come in right out overlooking the start line, just like this side of the guardrails. And no, I can't. You guys speak highly of it. The place, they've done a really nice job there, and the people do a superb job of running the place.
Yeah, Jerry and Clara do a real
Saturday, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I hope these guys keep it for a while.
We're hoping the same thing. We work a lot. With the Western York Super Out Association, we basically this past year or two have raced all our races out there as well. And Jerry and Clara are great to work with. And Jerry has put a lot of money into that track. They actually built a new since I don't know when the last time you were out there, but within the last month they built a new concession stand on the spectator side. And they're going to take the old concessions, the old meaning like 2-year-old concession stand, I guess, and move it over to the other side. And it's and my understanding is that there's more improvements that are underway or planned for this off season as well. And it's really turning out to be a very, very nice facility. And it's like yourself, I'm hoping that Jerry and Clara decide to continue to work there or own the track for quite a while, because they've just done an immaculate job there.
Oh no, they've done and they're great people. They're great people to talk to over there too. They're always very pleasant, and they go out of their way to make sure you got everything you need. I talked with Jerry yesterday. I told him I wanted to know what their schedule was going to be for the weekend. He says, "Well, if you come over, just call me ahead of time, and we'll designate a lane. He says, I'll spray that side of the track for you." So I mean, I'm just all I want to do is make a couple of runs. He's willing to accommodate me like that. Why wouldn't you support him?
Right. Yeah, good people for sure. Now, are you exclusively now really racing with the Can-Am Stock Super Stock Series? Is that where you're concentrating all of your efforts from a racing standpoint?
Well, no, I had intended to travel a little bit more so this year. I started out with a fresh engine that I had an issue with. It kind of slowed down, and that kind of hurt me in the middle of the season. I wanted to go some NHRA points races and stuff, and I never did get the opportunity. But I did finish the year. I went to Englishtown. I went to Lebanon Valley. Maple Grove, and then out of our 13 race series, the Can-Am deal, I raced the last 5, and a little bit of seat time helped because I shared one win. We got rained out in the final at Labor Day. I got to the semis the next day, and then we went to St. Thomas. I won on the Saturday night, got to the semis on Sunday. Wow. And then the last race at Cayuga, I got down to the quarterfinals. So in those the first 5 races, the last 5 races of the series.
Right.
I won 18 rounds and finished second at the point. So I focused the end of the year on the Can-Am deal. No, I just, you know how it is. I got on a very lucky streak, and things worked out. I mean, I won 1 or 2 races there by 1 or 2 10,000ths of a second. And, you know, it's just when luck turns your way, it turns your way, and it can just very easily turn to go the other way. And our sport has a way of humbling you in a hurry, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I just enjoy it for what it's worth at the time. So yeah, my goal for the next season, I want to start out in Gainesville. I'd like to go to Gainesville again with the girls. It'll be 32 years since I won that race next March. So I have enough NHRA grade points to enter there, and then I can start an early season because my summers get busy. So I'd like to do a little more racing earlier in the year, and then stick closer to home through the middle of the summer, and then do a little bit more like later on the road. So I have priorities. I mean, the travel is a little tougher anymore at my age. I mean, I used to be able to drive all night. Now I can only drive 10 to 12 hours. So
now, I mean, at this point, I mean, your daughters are a little younger than me, but they haven't hopped in the car and taken over the driving duties yet. Is that because they don't really have interest, or because Dad's not ready to give up the seat yet?
Absolutely not, buddy. You can stop right there. Chelsea, my middle daughter, has been my crew chief since she was 15. That's a good-looking, cute little blonde you see out there on the start line picking a spot for me. She's been my crew chief since she was 15. She's now 33.
Yeah.
And I got her license. She's had her NHRA license for about 5 or 6 years now, and I wanted to get her an NHRA license, get her upgraded to an NHRA license. And unfortunately, we fell a little short this year. I mean, she's been in the car. I think the first pass in the car, she went 949 at like 142 mile an hour with a 502 light.
Wow.
In front of everybody at the track, and kind of embarrassed me. I told her she's not allowed to do that anymore. So, and then my oldest daughter, Jessie, I let her go in the car a number of years ago. And, of course, she's got a career as a nurse, so she can't come out. She can't and doesn't come out that much anymore. But, no, Chelsea... all my 3 daughters, I'm very lucky. I got 3 piston heads. I don't have any sons, but I got 3 great daughters, man. So, and they still love the sport. I mean, we used to take them to the races from the time they were a year old. They got a lot of friends at the races all over the country. And I think with Chelsea, and once I get her license upgraded to NHRA for the coming season, I intend to let her race some local stuff next year. And then who knows, if she wins and she shows me how easy it is, then I'll back off.
Well, it'll be interesting. I know that I've seen plenty of pictures of you and your daughters when they were younger. When you were out multiple NHRA national events and holding them and stuff like that. So yeah, they've been going to the track for a long, long time for sure. And definitely not trying to kick you out of the seat. I was just curious as to why nobody had, I guess, forcibly pulled you out of the driver's seat yet. But it sounds like you're going to go kicking and screaming.
Probably. Chelsea, I asked Chelsea, I said, look, you want to race something? She's, no, Dad, you're having too much fun. So she's happy doing what she's doing right now, but I think this coming season, I'm gonna let her loose at least a few of the local races, let her go and have some fun. She deserves it. She helps me. If I need to change the transmission, she's right under there. She doesn't care. She doesn't give 2 hoots. She's right under there with me, helping to change the tranny, the rear, whatever. And I let her change the rods in the carburetor, and she helps me check the valves and stuff. So she's right into it, buddy.
Well, that's very cool. Well, hopefully we get a chance to, get a chance to see you, catch up with you in 2018 at a track someplace, and maybe we'll get a chance to see Chelsea behind the wheel. Chris, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask Wally? I don't want to keep him here all night.
Well, the tagline at the bottom of the screen was something that we haven't got into at all yet.
Which is what? I can't see the screen. So
this is Canadian Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
Oh, That's a pretty big honor.
Pretty cool. I was looking at some pictures, and I found a picture of what I believe was a Challenger that Wally had raced at some point. I think the reference was the mid-'70s at San Air.
No, that was a Camaro.
Oh, was it a Camaro? All the people there they hashtagged it Mopar.
No, you know what? There's another drag racer out somewhere in Ohio somewhere, and his name is Wally Clark, and he races a Mopar, not me.
Oh, it was on the Canadian. It was on the Canadian Hall of Fame page too. So maybe I just had the wrong body, or I wasn't reading the comments as carefully as I should have. I got all excited.
They had that it was a Grand Am. No, a Grand Prix, but it's actually it's a Grand Am.
Okay.
The Hall of Fame deal. That's flattering to me. I mean, just. All that means is that when we were kids out there having fun, somebody was actually watching. So I said to somebody, "Damn it! If I knew people were watching, we could have been a whole lot more serious."
Right. Now, were you in the inaugural class, Wally?
Yes, I was. I was in one of the first group that went in. That was in 2015. The third one is coming up in November, and then they don't tell you, they don't publish who's going in, so I really don't know who's going in. But
oh, really?
No, they don't publish. It's kind of a secret until everybody shows up at the gala, and it's really, you know what? It's really a nice deal. It's because it's sponsored and funded by. A Montreal businessman who has a whole bunch of dealerships, and he just specializes in classic. Other than the Lamborghini dealerships and everything else that he owns up there, his passion is for the muscle cars and the classic car dealership that he has. And he has anywhere upwards of 300-400 cars in stock at a time. That's John Scotty, and his right-hand man is an old announcer from up that way, Bob Bertin, and he funds the whole deal. And what they do is they put on a fabulous evening for the inductees and their wives and the past inductees, and we get a navy blue jacket with a Canadian Drag Racing Hall of Fame logo on the pocket on the outside, and you open up the inside and they have your name embroidered on the inside pocket with the year you were inducted, and get a really neat Hall of Fame ring.
Cool.
Jeez, that is very cool.
But it's very, very, very classy, and I mean they're classy people, and everything they do is first class. And I thought, well, that's pretty neat, boy. I get a nice jacket to wear, and I got a ring. But when I go to Italy, the Pope can kiss,
Well, and I have to say, I mean, again, and Chris, I don't know how many of these names that you would recognize, but I mean, the names that are on the list. There's 38 inductees so far. There's some huge names there, right? I mean, Dale Armstrong, Gordy Bonin, Wally Clark. I saw Sandy Elliott, Alban Gauthier, Bernie Federley, Graham Light. I mean, F.J. Smith. I mean, just some huge names. And I'm sure if I went through more of them, I'd see more of them. But that's a pretty big honor, Wally, to be not only in the Hall of Fame, but really to be in the inaugural class. I mean, that just really it speaks volumes for what you've accomplished in the sport.
Well, I got to tell you, it's very flattering and humbling to be there. With that, they got some tremendous drag races in there, and for the organizing committee to consider me to be part of that, that's very humbling and it's flattering, and I can't tell you, man. It's a great deal, and some of those people I've known for a long time too. But to be in that mix it's very much an honor, very much an honor.
Well, and I have to say, well deserved for sure. I mean, growing up as a kid, I mean, I watched you racing all the time, and you were clearly, one of the best guys out there, and real tough competitor. And you've had the success to back it up. So I mean, yeah, well deserved. So yeah, if I can understand being humbling, but certainly well deserved.
But I got to tell you, I'm awful lucky. I've had a lot of really good people help me out over the years too. So, and it's I appreciate that, but it's, like I say, there's a lot of luck involved, and I've been a very lucky guy, and I'm thankful for that.
Sure. Oh yeah.
For sure.
When I really consider, some of the stuff that I've won over the years, and I've raced seriously now for a long time, but I know a lot of my good friends that have raced as long as I have, and they've never really had a snort, and I'm flattered that all that good luck has come my way, and I'm thankful that it has, and it's nice to be able to have some level of success at what you do for enjoyment. It is what it is, and I'm just thankful that it's happened to me. And I cannot tell you how happy I am when I see somebody that I know and some people that I don't know that I've seen them struggle for years and years out there racing, doing the best that they can when they win. And whenever I can get a hold of them, I personally like to call them and congratulate them, because I know that feeling. It's a great feeling to be able to go out and do something like that. And when you win one, when it's your passion, and it's still a passion for a lot of people, to go out and be successful at your passion, it's a great feeling. And especially the first one. Especially for the first one. It's a superb feeling, and I'm really happy that it happens to other people.
Spoken like a true champion.
Well, it's just the way I feel, that's all. It is what it is. I mean, it's a great deal. Especially when I know I've beaten him a couple of times, I remember now, I raced Jimmy Bridges for the final in Topeka, and I didn't realize it, but that was my world championship round. I was in the final, and earlier in the day, like Jimmy Bridges, you know Jimmy from down in Tennessee, he used to run a 64 Chevelle Superstock car with a 283, and God, 35 years ago, he used to have a 1432 tire under it. And I always liked that car. He had it painted with the American flag on it, and Jimmy, he's just a real Southerner. He's a real cool guy. So his tow rig burned up a transmission out there in Kansas, and I helped him crawl under and change it, like the automatic in his dually. And we were talking, and then he whipped me in the final. And that's the actual round that I lost the world championship in 91 or 92, whenever it was. And I said, Jimmy, I always wanted to see you win a national event, but damn it, not at my expense, That is what it is. I mean, for those losses, I've had enough wins, and that all equals itself out. Like I say, I mean, I've had a great time at it. I've met a lot of great people over the years that I've traveled. We've seen a lot of the country, and my kids have seen a lot of the country when we traveled. And to be honest with you, if I had a chance to do it all over again, there's not much of it, and there's not much of it I would have changed. Probably none of it. We've had a great time. It's been a great career. It's been a great sport to be a part of.
Hard to argue that.
Yeah, I can't argue that. It really is a great. It's expensive at times, and certainly frustrating and humbling, and all the rest of it. But there's no doubt that it is a great sport to be involved with, and I'm thankful that I'm able to compete in it as well. I'm a lucky guy for sure.
And we all are, and it's just, if it gets to the point where I quit racing, I'll just travel with the kids, let them race, show me how easy it is.
Right.
I know that's why my dad put me in the car when I was 18.
My kids weren't that young, but they all grew up on a property out in Niagara Lake, and then they all used to ride the four-wheelers and the golf carts from the time they were 4 and 5 years old. So they all got to be pretty good drivers. So at least when they jumped in the car, they were confident. So it's a good deal.
Yeah. No, my dad, like I said, I know my dad just got tired of me listening to telling him everything he did wrong after every race. So it was like, oh, it's so easy? Well, you do it then. Here you go.
Absolutely. I remember my kids when I screwed up, I could tell them, I spun. Something happened. I spun this, that, or the other. So as they grew up and they understood what the reaction times and everything were,
right,
and they'd watch how the car left and what happened, they'd understand the numbers. So at the end of the race, if I lost, Dad, where's your slip? It was right here. They look at it, flip the thing up in the air. Nice RT, Dad. So I got to the point where I couldn't lie to them anymore. They knew too much. Yeah, well, we'll see. we'll see how they make out. It'll be like the rest of the sport. It will evolve.
Yeah, indeed so. Wally, man,
I'm looking forward to the coming season. We'll see what happens. I intend to race a little more and work a little less. I'm tied up in a couple of projects that are keeping me pretty busy this past summer and into the early part of the year. And then when that ends, I'll have some more time. And I'm looking forward to traveling again, going out and seeing a bunch of friends and racing a little harder and just doing what I've always done. The competitive spirit's still there. The body's getting a little weaker for the drives, but instead of making one day, we'll make it a 2-day trip. That's all.
Right. Well, we wish you the best. Wish you the best of luck. Hopefully, all those projects go smooth and you can get back to racing sooner rather than later. And be sure to keep in touch and let us know how everything's going through the first couple months of 2018 when you do make it back to the track. And we certainly wish you the best and be safe on the travels.
Well, I thank you very much.
We appreciate you coming on the show and hanging out with us for a little while, especially on the short notice, man. It was a great talk, and I know there's still questions that I didn't get to that you'll have to come back on again at the start of the year before you go down to Gainesville to field some more of those and tell us a few more stories.
It'll be my pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it, Wally. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Wally.
Okay, guys. Take care and good night.
See ya.
Thanks a lot.
There goes Wally Clark, the one and only. Great conversation tonight, and I'm glad everything panned out. Jason stuck without a car, had to do it via remote, but it seemed to work out okay. I think we have some audio things that we need to work on a little bit in terms of streamlining it because we were getting some weird levels periodically. But all in all, I think it was a pretty good show.
Well, good. I thought it was good. I have to say, from my side, I thought hopefully the video turned out okay with the streaming Skype. But I think it worked pretty well. And Wally's always an entertaining guest. He's got a lot of great stories to tell, quite a history. And I'm lucky to know him. Really, he's really a great guy.
He seemed like an awesome guy. It was a good appearance. It was another good episode. Episode number 25. In the books. We appreciate everybody who tuned in and listened along with us. If you have any feedback, shoot it to us. Jason, make sure you listen to the replay and let me know what you think on how all those levels panned out. Jason Oldfield joining us via Skype. That's going to do it for this one. We appreciate everybody tuning in to listen to the Final Round podcast, coming to you from the North Park building here at Academy Square, the downtown Seneca Falls home of Finger Lakes 1. We appreciate it. Again, the support. We'll be back again in 2 weeks. We'll see you then. Drag Racing Podcast, coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York. We'll see you right back here again in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching.